everybody, welcome to the Man Alone solo role-playing YouTube channel. I'm your guy, I'm Man Alone, and today we're going to be talking about a game that you've probably seen parked at the top of Drive-Thru RPG, I think almost a week now. We're going to be talking Grimwild, a cinematic fantasy adventure. And before we get into that, I just wanted to briefly talk about my sound. Last video, I tried to update my sound because I've been recording almost 2 years. I've never learned how to do anything with sound, and I finally said, hey, you know what? What if I watched a YouTube video for 6 minutes and the person on the video seemed very confident. They said, put this here, put this here, put this here. And so I did it and I listened and I said, hey, sounds pretty good to me. I wanted the sound to be like more in front of the video. And I don't really have any knowledge of what any of this stuff means, but you think of like David Attenborough, his voice is in front of the image, right? And I felt like my voice was always behind the screen. If that makes any sense, truly. I don't know if it does. It's just what I felt. And I was like, I wanted to make my voice more prominent so that it was more, how do I say this? Okay. Like I wanted my voice like this, right? And that's you listening to me, but I think I made it too loud, so it was like that. And then all of you in the comments kind of told me like what was wrong. And so I was kind of surprised. I said, I thought it sounded pretty good. And then I listened to it and I was like, this does not sound good. And so I've tried to correct it again. And now it's just, I had to take all the stuff off because I kept toggling and all this stuff. I had no idea what any of this stuff meant. Compressor, expander, equalizer. I mean, they all sound like Denzel Washington movies. And every single thing that I did seemed to maybe sound good, but then I would talk a little bit and it would just be like an explosion, like I was blowing raspberries on the microphone. So I took it all off. I went back to the start, went back to my roots. So I don't know. Maybe this is as good as it gets. Who knows? But I will say the sound, maybe that didn't work as an upgrade. My new brace doesn't work as an upgrade. They said I had to come in and get a new brace. I had like this sleek black canvas, or I don't know what it was, but it looked awesome. They said, come in and get a new one. And I'm like, a new one? This looks like something that you find in your grandfather's closet in 1991 when you're moving him into the facility. What in the world? And on top of that, it's got like diaper sounds on it. So I don't know how long. I don't know how much more I could take, you know. But there is one upgrade, and that upgrade is you can't see it, and I don't want to reveal it because I want the video to be a nice, to appear seamless. But I actually made a checklist for this video, if you can believe it, because I want to do my best to stay focused in this video, because I think if I don't, I'm going to I'm going to lose the thread, and I'm going to lose all of you forever. Because, all right, let me just talk from the heart here. I really like Grimwild, and I'm having trouble with that. Or I was. I've come to peace about it. I have since come to peace about it. But this game had aura to me. Okay, it had aura, and it had that kind of aura. If you've ever been shopping for something that is pretty rote for you, something that's pretty habitual, like say the thing I'm thinking of is shoes. Say you're going to get, like, every once in a while, if you work in an office or something, you have to go get a new pair of shoes. I'm not talking about somebody who like dresses nice with like nice, you know, $4,000 suit. I'm saying a person who is forced to squeeze their legs into like khakis and a button-up shirt and a barely closing tie. You know, once in a while, your brown shoes just like flop out of use. They look like flat tires. And you go to DSW Shoe Source or whatever, and you're like, all right, I'm just going to get the usual here. You know, little bit of a variation every 3 years, but it's pretty much the same. And then all of a sudden, you see a pair of shoes that are, wow, those are different. And you might even make fun of them at first. You're like, who would wear those? And then you just keep, you go, well, I'll just get the norm. But then you keep looking at them. And maybe, you know, like instead of the standard sort of, like, if there's, I don't know how these look. You have like the standard Sketcher or Sketcher equivalent. And maybe even like if you're my age, you're like you're starting to flirt with no laces. You know, you're like, oh, what do I need laces for? And then it's like you got to do the math on that because if you go no laces, you're only like 10 years away from doing Velcro. But suddenly you see these shoes and they're, you know, they're work shoes, but they've got like something going on there. And maybe in addition to like, you know, the standard brown, there's something like the tag has like a little flare of blue or something like that. And you keep like they're out of your price range too, you know, because you don't have money. Like, well, what are you spending money? Who cares? But you keep thinking about them. And here's what I have found in my 40 years of living. Not much, but here's something I found. If you get that shoe or whatever it is, you get the glasses, you get whatever, it's going to be one of your like best things that you get for yourself. It's going to be the thing that gets compliments. It's going to be the thing that like defines you as a person. And so if you turn your back on the blue suede shoe, if you turn your back on this and you go and get like, you know, the Sketcher Dullard XR or whatever, that's just you know, it's a missed opportunity, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but the thing I think is important to point out here is that you don't know why you like this shoe. And a little side note here: shoes suck these days, man. I went shoe shopping, and there's nothing for guys. Like I'm talking, and you know who you are, gentlemen. All right, the $60 shoe guys. Even 60 is kind of pushing it. Like you'd go with a $40 shoe. You'd go to Payless if you knew where one was. But anyways, Grimwild has that sort of aura because there's a lot in Grimwild that is the sort of thing that I don't usually go for. In fact, in some ways, it's got some of the things that I say, hey, enough, or "Oh, what are we trying to do with this thing here?" Um, and yet I'm trying to figure out what it is because I can't really pin it um, on multiple levels. I can't pin it on multiple levels because it's like um, the art is good, like fine. It's good. It's good. It actually is like kind of cool. It's not that fluffy, flumpy, modern. Let me see if I can find an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, this is like the perfect picture, and it's from a website called Free Pick, but I have to attribute it, so I'm just going to do this right now. So here is an image that you could find on freepik.com, freepik.com. And this is by a user or a contributor named Peaky Superstar, and you'll be able to see that in the bottom left corner. And this image is called Hand Drawn Flat Design Crowd of People Walking Illustration, and it's terrible. It's like this sort of featureless, bland, weirdly like distorted so that people look like they look like they have it's like their legs are like 800-pound cement columns, and then their heads are tiny. They look like the guy from Beetlejuice who has the shrunken head in The Office. And I'm not kidding. Like this, whatever this is, from user Peaky Superstar on freepick.com, this is like, for whatever reason, um, uh, the it's like everything is becoming this. Like everything is sort of being morphed into this type of art in one way or another. And maybe it's not exactly that, but that sort of flavor is showing up everywhere. And I there's lots of forces that are driving things in that way. I mean, the end game is like it's just a symptom far in advance of like you start with these illustrations from Peaky Superstar on freepick.com, and then 1,000 years from now you're just like the Borg. You know what I mean? But I'm seeing this sort of junk in tabletop games. I'm seeing like these cartoonish, um, very like weak people, like people with no upper body strength, who I'm supposed to believe are like brandishing a battle axe and stuff. And so it definitely does not have that. At the same time, we did a video on Moria. That's a game that I would say has like hyper exceptional art, right? And so, but it's competent, it's good, and I think like the pictures are cool in terms of what they're showing, right? Like it's pretty good stuff. And obviously this is like a dark fantasy, it's Grimwild, grimdark. And so definitely the contrasts and the shading, all of that works. But in terms of the mechanics, these are mechanics that I think if you watch my channel for long enough, you would assume that I wouldn't be into that very much. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to, as succinctly as is possible for me, and I really am going to like try hard with this. I am going to talk about the main features of Grimwild. All right. And I'm going to highlight the things that I think are either unique contributions or well done contributions or are relevant to the overall game that is being created. There are not a lot of videos, surprisingly, yet on Grimwild. There will be, but one of the main videos is a video saying, "Oh, is this the new D&D?" Or like, "Oh, is this gonna take over D&D?" And I want to say to my fellow tabletop creators, please stop this. Please stop this. Okay? First of all, it is when you make a video that has a name like that, whatever you are comparing to has already won. Do you understand that? Like nobody uh like Jake Paul, is he the one, or is it Logan is the tall one? Logan Paul doesn't make videos that are like, is Man Alone the next Jake Paul? You know what I'm saying? Like there's you would never like compare that, right? Thank God. But like it's not even the same league. Those guys have like hundreds of millions of followers and stuff like that. And so to even create that comparison indicates that the comparison is moot. Okay, I know this very well because I went to a university. It was a very good university, and but it wasn't like a it wasn't like an Ivy League university, but it was very good, and it was overshadowed by the fact that very close to it was like one of the top national universities. I didn't want to go there because I wanted to go to like a smaller school where I had more um, interface with my instructors. I wanted there to have like a sort of a mission based school and stuff. So I'm very happy that I went to this school, but there would constantly be these things that would like compare us to them. And it was just so pathetic because the truth is we compared ourselves to them all the time, but they didn't even think about us. And so no, it's not going to dethrone D&D, okay? Um and because popularity is not the same as quality. Dungeons and Dragons has a top spot in the tabletop industry because it is 50 years old. It has a massive corporate backing. It has a brand recognition that spans generations, and it has one of the most coveted. If any of you are marketing people, please confirm this because I'm fairly confident in what I'm about to say. It has achieved one of the most coveted things that is ever possible for a brand, and that is for the brand to take over the name of the product. So in the US, and BB and I, it is not the same in the UK. I didn't realize this. Tissue, but in the US, facial tissue is Kleenex. Kleenex is a brand. And but it's so ubiquitous that people just say Kleenex or Solo cup, right? Even though there's other types of cups. D&D is for many people synonymous with RPG, or many people know the name Dungeons and Dragons and don't even know RPG. They don't even know that, right? And so we must stop because it's not meaningful. It's not a meaningful comparison because it blows everything out of the water. It blows everything out of the water because it is so well known. It's so commercially successful. And the idea that a game like Grimwild, which is made by Oddity Press, which is a nice, um, it looks like they have a good team going here and lots of people that can help them, and they got some good momentum. But I don't think I think probably Wizards of the Coast has, I would venture to say, 1,000 times more employees in this company. I would wonder about that. Um, at least 100 times more. And they have entirely different purposes. They have a different level of fantasy that they're engaged in. They're different focuses regarding combat and classes. D&D has structured mechanics. I know that some people would say since 3 or 3.5, not as much so, but it's still tactical. And it has some kind of accessibility to new players, whether that is mechanical accessibility or just that when you learn how to play, if you're interested in tabletop role playing game and you live in like outside of Topeka, Kansas, in a town of 58 people, you need to learn that because that's what they're playing, right? And there's those little towns outside of Topeka everywhere. Um, Grimwild is cinematic. It's narrative driven. It's far more improvisational, and so it's not even occupying the same space. And so just because this game has stated that it draws inspiration from that, it also draws inspiration from a lot of other things too. I think it mentions Blades in the Dark. Where did I find this? We'll talk about Moxie. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but yeah. So I mean, it's drawing a variety of influences, and it's pretty hard to not draw influences from D&D, right? It's pretty hard because in a lot of ways D&D like created the game, okay? And I also think that the way that this draws influence is subverting the dominant paradigms of D&D. It is taking the things that D&D does and it's saying, here is where like here is where we end up emotionally uh through the experience of playing D&D, right? And so whatever these squares are that precede this like sense of satisfaction or enjoyment, D&D, has the lots of different items and weapons, tactical play, a big lore, a big setting. All of these things result in like this feeling. And so maybe this game is going after this feeling too, but it's coming like this way. Okay, so almost everything is going to be different, but they might still achieve the same outcome. All right, and I don't want to I don't want to harp on this too much, because I in some sense I do get it, but we have to stop framing the success of games in their comparison to D&D. And to think that the only way for an RPG to matter is if they take the top spot. It doesn't. They're like most people that are members of SEAL Team Waffle Alpha, the Man Alone members only Discord. There's about 70, and I don't know of many that are just D&D players. In fact, of all the conversations we have had, I don't know if D&D has occupied more than 3% of them, and even then it's like tangentially, right? And so no game needs to dethrone D&D to be great. And Grimwild, I can't speak for Oddity Press, but I don't think they're trying to be the top dog. They're just trying to be themselves. And so there is something taken away from these games when we do that as well, because we are defining them in relation to something else. And quite honestly, if I was a game designer, that would piss me off. Like if somebody just said, oh, yeah, your game has this definition, and the definition was the way that it was similar or different to D&D. Okay. Um, so we really don't have to keep fixating on this challenge. We have this need. This is click generating culture. I understand this. Different creators have different relationships with that. I don't really buy into the thing of like, hey man, hey look, that's a game, because like you can keep saying that's the game you got to play to like some very dangerous places in this world. I'm not saying any of these creators are going that direction, but that's not always like a valid excuse for me of like, hey, that's what you got to do, right? But at the same time, I do recognize that um, if you don't do certain things that you want to do less than other things, you might not be relevant. And I understand that if you really want to blow up and have a big channel, you talk D&D, right? And then apparently 5 years in, you just get laid off or something from D&D YouTube. But um, it's this need for a challenger narrative. There always has to be the next big thing. Watch Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's about his contest with Lou Ferrigno, the guy who played Incredible Hulk. And the whole documentary is like, is Lou Ferrigno going to unseat Arnold? Is he going to take away the Mr. Universe and everything? And by the end of it, you almost believe it. And then Arnold just like destroys him. He doesn't even take second place. Okay. Um, so the fact that people need to keep bringing it up, it actually like helps D&D. I mean, honestly. So, anyways, um, look, if you want something that is structured, class based, tactical fantasy, D&D, go for it. Pathfinder, go for it. Whatever one has the allure. If you want something that's fast, improvisational, you want something that's cinematic, and we're going to talk about what that means, then Grimwild has something there that D&D does not have. And so and I'm very curious about what they have. And I friends, I have thought very hard about this, and I am going to talk about this at the end of the video, because I know there are some of you who would rather put toothpicks under your fingernails than listen to the final part of this video, whereas others are very interested in this. But I the thing that I was caught up on is how similar Grimwild is to Fate. And if you saw my video on Fate, I didn't trash it. In fact, I recognized that it was quite good, but I just didn't like it. I just didn't want to play it, right? And why then was I reading over this game that has a good amount of similarities to it, and yet none of those same sensors were going off? And this threw me into a scary place for somebody who like strives for internal consistency, because I was like, well, what am I, like a hack? Like what? Like a book has like a better cover and then I just like it? And in truth, that's probably true more often than we'd like to admit. But it took me some long sits and some long thinks, and I sat and I think I've figured it out. I've cracked the code. So we'll talk about that at the end of the video. But suffice to say, this is a game that has made choices. And I am so happy that this game is out there. I'm so happy. Let's not even talk about my overall impressions of it. It has made choices. It has limited certain possibilities. It has circumscribed itself. It stopped itself. It does not have a section on, oh, well, do you want this also to be sci-fi? Or, oh, do you want this also? It knows what it is, okay? And it within that span of what it is, it has made extremely interesting mechanical choices. I have to say up front, not this is not like a disclaimer, like a warning, but it is not. There's no lore. There's tone. There's some adventures that betray a setting, like it is grimdark, and so. But as of now, you know, who knows about future iterations or stuff. I actually hope that this is developed out into more of a setting, because I think it could really, really pair well with that. It's like talking about what kind of white wine to have or something like that. All right. So let's we're done, and I'm checking this off. Look at this. I showed the PDF. I talked about the sound. I talked about D&D competition. Yeah, I'm going to overview the highlights, okay? The key mechanics of this. So, first things first, it is narrative-driven resolution. Storytelling over complex rules. It wants, it aims for, it contends that it will offer quick, intuitive resolutions that are directed at pushing the narrative forward. Actions are going to be resolved usually single dice roll, and it resolves success and consequences in one shot. Instead of pausing the game to bury your face in a rule book, it is created to encourage players to make decisions and move the story forward. It aims to be empowering of players. Okay, so that's as far as its goals for narrative. It utilizes something called the Moxie system, which I have never heard of. I'm wondering if any of you have heard of it. But oh, and by the way, I am receiving a review copy of this book, but I haven't even gotten it yet. I just like wanted to talk about this so bad, because of sort of some of the breakthroughs that I've had. But this Moxie system here, I'll bring it up. Okay, so it is the Moxie rule set, and it exists outside of it. If you even look at the front here, there's like a logo for Moxie. Please let me know if anybody knows of anything else with the Moxie toolkit. I mean, I could look it up. But yeah, this is version 1.2, actually. It says 1.1, but the new one came out today. So this is like hot off the press. The Kickstarter for the hardcover, I believe, is over. You're able to get the PDF on drive-through, though, and pretty affordable. All right, so Moxie cinematic narrative collaboration. You are creating an imagination space, managing the spotlight, diving into the narration. Terror. To me, that's not what I want, right? Because this is what I start seeing, or I should say, that's not what I thought I wanted, or that's not what I usually want. Because these are the kind of things that you see very often in 17 and 18 page quasi journaling standalone solo RPGs, where the mechanics are about like your internal emotional movements. Fine. Some people really like that. For me, I forgot what game it is, but there's a game where it's like, okay, you have to like turn out the lights. And I think there's one game that's like roll the dice, and that's how many minutes you have to sit silently in the dark. And I'm just like, no, I'm not, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because for me, a game that somebody made who I do not know, and who I've never met, and who I have not been able to determine if the game is interesting or fun or well made. Excuse me, but you have like no right to give me such instructions that early on in our relationship, right? Maybe if we build to the point where I want to do that. I mean, look at Pendragon. I literally want to have like a feast during the Christmas feast period. Like I'm that enrolled in Pendragon. So shared imagination space, managing the spotlight, diving into narration. I'm loosening my collar. I'm going, oh boy, oh no. The rules get you halfway there. The other half's in your hands. Okay. Play cinematically. Now this is where things start to get like, they start to click a little bit more into focus. Okay. Trust in the collaborative process. Fine. Right column. Tell us what it looks like before and after your rolls. Fine. But then start noticing the language used here. Use the camera, your shared imagination. Use the camera. Each player has two perspectives, from your character and as the audience watching the show. Use the camera and vivid description to paint a cool scene in everyone's mind. Look at this one. Don't be a weasel. Love this. You could also get a copy of the game PDF for free. It's available on let's see if I can find it here. Well, they have all the links. Well, you don't have it to get the links yet. odditypress.com. Get a free copy of it. And that's what I'll be looking at in terms of this. I will be just looking at the free copy stuff consciously. I apologize if I accidentally dip into something that's not, but separate player and character knowledge. So this is a shift. It's not necessarily telling you to sit alone in a dark room, but now it's asking you to do things inside like your sensory motor areas of your brain, and it's asking you to divide up tasks, right? So this is a big ask. And especially as a solo player, you know that it's not always so easy to like see something from two perspectives at once, right? It's not easy to play to like move a black chess piece and then flip the board and move a right one and have both equal will in both of those, right? The mind is biased even against itself. But we're going to attempt to do that. Use the meta channel sparingly, so it wants you to stay in the game and then know the rules. Good gravy. Would I love everyone to read that? Here's the Moxie system. Uses D6 for most actions. Okay. Wants there to be D6 resolution so that it's quick and dirty. All right. This is more about like the narrative mechanics. Let me really quick get to the rolling. Oh, really quick. Here's the thematically. It draws heavily on the heroic fantasy of D&D and wears this influence on its sleeve. It's especially rooted in 3rd edition onwards. Inspiration's also taken from Dungeon World, which I heard there's a Dungeon World 2, but it's going to have a different author. Unlimited Dungeons, Chasing Adventure, Homebrew, Stonetop. The Moxie system, biggest influences being Burning Wheel, Cortex Prime, Blades in the Dark, and Fate. So thematically, D&D, mechanically, these other games. Now, I know about Blades in the Dark. I know about Fate. I don't know much about Cortex Prime. And I'm surprised to see Burning Wheel, because when I was introduced to Burning Wheel, or the way that people would talk about it, I thought Burning Wheel was super crunch, which I think it is. I mean, I'm not denying that. It's just that, I mean, it looks like a King James Bible. It's that thick, but um, I didn't know that it was crunch around like narrative based. So I know there's somebody in our Discord who is like obsessed with Burning Wheel. So make yourself known so that we can talk about Burning Wheel. I would pick it up. I used to see it all the time in my game store, and I never see it anymore. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I actually should have started here to talk about some key terms here. So let me just take a quick detour. Okay, I just want to move it over a little bit here. So I'm like doing things with my hands. They're not anything, but I don't know. I feel like we're not communicating. Okay, so from this page, pretty much everything here is either as expected or is easily intuited. Sessions about 3 hours, ideal group size GM and 3 to 4, but in chapter 7 we have solo and duet play rules. They're pretty brief, but I think they're pretty robust, shall we say. And then each player needs 4 to 6 D6s, 2 to 4 D8s. So the D8s are called thorns, and they are denoted as T. And then the GM needs 8 D6s, because we're going to find that the GM is also making moves. All right. And then pools. If you look on the right, second bullet down, in Grimwild, pool always refers to diminishing pools on page 13, and we'll talk about that. And then the other thing that I just find really funny is crucibles. These are D66 tables that provide a few words to smash together for inspiration. So solo players, we are very familiar with these. We would call these oracles. Crucibles is interesting. I mean, crucible is a cross, so I'm wondering if it has anything. Well, we'll find out. And then this is the page right here where we go, oh, so they weren't just making an analogy, okay? Because up until this point, this book uses this cinematic language. And other games do use this cinematic language as well, right? You know, feel free to cut forward or fade to black, you know, all this stuff. And you go, yeah, I get that. That's a good analogy, right? Because we're building a narrative. This is the page where we go, no, dude, you're making a movie, right? Look at playing the game. As a player, describe what your character thinks, feels, and does. When you try something risky, make an action roll. No surprise. When the GM puts you in direct danger, make a defense roll. You can also make a montage roll to skip past parts you don't want to play out in detail. Love it. I love that. I actually love that. You know why? Because if you are in a group and somebody does not want to play through something and you do not have a mechanic for this, everyone at the table has to skip it. I don't think that's fair. And I'll go no further than that on that, but I don't think that's fair, right? Because it's just preferencing one person's avoidance of bad feelings over another person's feeling of good feelings, right? So you create these mechanics so that we can still like play without, we can still keep the play going, okay? Then rolls are made with a handful of D6s equal to a stat. You keep the highest, and that's set to an outcome. Perfect, messy, grim. All right. And where do we got it here? Okay. So you pull out your stat dice, and, you know, depending on what you're trying to do, you'll use one of your stats: brawn, agility, wits, presence. And you can see right from here that the condition here is bloodied for these two, or rattled. All right. And so if I am using agility, I'm trying to just avoid something. I got 2. I'm going to roll, and I'm going to take the result. And I keep the highest one, which is nice, so it leans on me that way. And then depending on the outcome of the higher die, it could be perfect, messy, or grim, okay? And when that happens, we cut. We cut to something worse because we are going to keep things moving, okay? I know this might not be clicking for you yet, especially if you're somebody that's like, just give me the stats, Jack. Just please hang on a little longer than you normally would, because I think this game is a game that constantly, as I was reading through this, it's like 170 pages or so. Constantly, as I was reading through this, I said in my head, "Oh, great, here we go." And then we didn't go. We went somewhere else. This game makes choices. This game has a vision. It has an authorship to it. It is not made by committee. Well, it might be made by a group of people, but it's not one of these games that's basically like a game that you get at the end once you've yielded to a bunch of like other people's hypothetical demands, right? So, let me just find my spotting. All right. So you figure that out. Is it perfect, messy, grim? Rolling 2 6s is a crit and you get a bonus. Difficulty and damage, add 1 or more d8s called thorns to your roll, which might cut the outcome down a level. All right. We'll talk about that. If a grim gets cut, it's a disaster and things get really bad for you. So these cuts, pay attention to that, because I know that I used it in terms of like cut to, X scene outside of the military base or whatever. But that word cut is a big part of like the overall mechanic of this game that is interacting with the theme of it. I think a lot of it is found there. Now, let's go even further into the movie. Use your creative freedom to add set dressing and a narrative currency called story to declare significant story details. Earn spark by introducing character-related complications called tangles and facing adversity, then spend it to get a bonus on rolls. Now, think about this. This means that you are benefiting from leaning into the narrative of your character. In fact, you are benefiting from something that so many games say, create your character, and then here's a list of like quirks or weaknesses. You can roll on that if you want. Who the hell would roll on that? Why would I want a weakness? You cough whenever anyone says macaroni. It's like, why would I want that? And this here, though, it's like, we want there to be complexity, and you are rewarded for it. After each session, you earn experience towards increasing in level, which grants new talents. Okay? The GM has moves. Oops, I dropped my pen. Has moves, and these moves can be used as tools. This might be reminding you of another game. And yes, we'll talk about that later. And then we use the story rolls and GM crucibles, which are tools to help the GM with emergent play. And let me tell you, this sounds like this game is going to be an intro to solo play without the GM even knowing it, because a lot of these things that are done here by the GM are very familiar to solo players. All right. Make story rolls to disclaim decision making and use the GM crucible to help come up with ideas. Control the camera to create a cinematic feel, zooming in and out on what's important. Now, what's interesting about this, if any of you listened to the pod that I did with 2 members of a group that I GM'd with, they talk about this, that I have always done this. I have always done this. In fact, it's not even like a clever innovation of mine. I've always naturally done this. I'll say like, okay, now really quick, we're going to freeze everybody. Now the camera's going to kind of go over here. Tell me what you're thinking right now. We're able to see really close on your face. Are you, what's the look in your eyes? Do you have disdain? Is part of your mouth slightly lifted up there? And this is a really good way to maintain control over the story without maintaining control over the players. Okay? because you're just choosing what to look at. Use diminishing pools to create and track tension, and challenges to represent the toughest, most interesting obstacles PCs face. So a lot of terms up front, but diminishing pools. Let's take a look. Okay, diminishing pools. A set of D6s used to track things like time, resources, and effort. When triggered, roll the pool and drop 1d for each 1 to 3 result. At 0 dice, the pool depletes and the fiction changes. The size of the pool is dependent. It's either 4 d6 for a short-term thing, 6 for middle term or middle size, and 8 for long. And at 0, an event occurs, a situation ends, or a resource is depleted. Okay, so really quick, some of you might be going, oh no, we are abstracting all of these sort of like resources into a simplified role, right? Like we're putting all of it into one thing, and I know about that. I know that that doesn't work because I have one of two opinions that people have about another game that people would like to hear about on my channel, and they will soon, which is the D6 resource die, right? And so the two schools of thought on that are, it's great. You don't have to worry about all that stuff. You lose a little bit of granularity, but you gain a lot of speed and you gain a lot of ease of resource management and mental cognitive load. No, it is probably closer actually to Forbidden Lands. Okay, step dice. Dice that your mother remarried. No, so step dice, if you have a lot of a resource, right, you have a D12 step dice, and every time you use that, okay, I just shot some arrows from my quiver, I'm gonna roll it, and if I get a 1 or a 2, I step it down. So from here, I would go down to a D10, right? And then I would roll that until I got a 1 or 2. And then I would go down to a D8, right? And then I would go down to a D6 and then a D4. And if I roll a 1 or a 2 on a D4, and if you haven't done this before, it's like every time you step down, the chance that you're going to get a 1 or a 2 steps up, right? That's more what this is. And friends, I love this. I love this, and I'm jelly. I'm jelly gels, because this is one of those things that I think in my early naive attempts to like create certain mechanics in games, which, you know, I think if you're new to solo or you're new to tabletop and you're a creative person and you're also somebody who loves to write and stuff, you've definitely gone through this phase where like you're 3 months in and you go, I can do this. I can like create my own game. And it's like I would create 40 pages worth of explanation for a mechanic that essentially is achieved right here in diminishing pools. Take a look at the right column. There are timer pools, events unfolding in the background. Okay, clock. Love that. Sunrise, 8D. Pressure pools, task pools, resource pools. All right. So essentially, you'd say, is this short, medium, long? And it could also be like, if it's a resource, it could be like not so much, average, a lot. And you take that many dice, and let's say that it is the cave that you're in is starting to crumble, and you don't have much time. Basically, any time that there is an event is triggered, which the GM would figure that out, but we'll have ways to do that in solo play. You would re-roll these, okay, and you would any of them that come up as a 1 or a 3, and this is devastating, right? Jeez. So any of them that come up as a 1 or a 3 are dropped, and they're gone. And when you hit 0, that wasn't a great example though, because I think that's quite a dramatic outcome. So it's like, okay, we're running along, and all of a sudden we're at a fork in the road. Okay, we hesitate a little bit. We got to roll. All right, so 1 to 3. These are done. So we only have this die left. Okay, so we're running again. We got to get over this like ledge here. A 1, right? So now it's over. Whatever was going to happen happens, and you have to deal with that new fiction. You have some options in there. I don't want to get I've made a decision while I was paused there that like I think I'm getting too granular on the rules. This is definitely worth looking at the different options that you have. uh, the diminishing pools is such a flexible mechanic. It is right now, maybe I'm in a honeymoon phase of it, but I am just thinking of so many things in solo play that I can manage this way. And not only is it easy, not only is it effective at like it has a medium to high level of correlative abstraction, or at least medium. At least medium. I haven't tested it enough to say otherwise, but it's not low. It's not like one of these rolls that might be present in other games that people would want me to review, where you're like, okay, well, I just got new torches, and then I rolled a 3 on my resource die, and now my torch burned out. Like, why? Why did that happen right away? That kind of thing is going to be very rare. Okay. But on top of that, it does the thing that Year Zero engine does. And yes, I understand some of you are going to disagree with me here, but it is a fun dice roll. It's fun. It's fun to roll a crap load of dice. And when you add thorns into the mix, they drop the result of sorry, this is not diminishing pools. This is actually like dice rolls here. Sorry. I'm crossing streams, but when you're doing a straight up action roll, you are going to determine again what stat you're going to choose. So I'm trying to think of like something here that I'm conscious not. I don't want to make something confusing, so we'll use like strength. Okay, so fine. The cave is crumbling, and we are running out of it. And one of the two of the members of the party run forward, and they hold up the door so that everybody else can get out. Okay, so that's a strength roll. And so let's see if there's some numbers on here. Great. So our brawn is 3. All right. And because it's a 3, we grab that many dice, we roll that many dice, and we choose the highest one, which once again, a absolutely horrible roll. Holy crap. So that would be a grim outcome. Okay. But if we were rolling that and it had a higher difficulty level, so normal toughness, no thorns. Tough 1 thorn, tough 2 for like really difficult things. So this one is pretty difficult, right? Because you got to hold up a big door. But they're pretty strong. And so there's this listing here on the right that says like the factors that the GM might use could be intrinsic, external, intangible, mojo. I love that. Like just the vibe that accounts for things like if somebody's really motivated. Think of Pendragon. If you have like hatred towards a group, you're going to be more motivated in combat. So we're going to say that it's 1 thorn. If a thorn rolled with these dice equals a 7 or 8, you are going to drop the category of your roll by 1. All right. So just to make this simple, you roll however many dice you want to roll, and you take the highest result. Okay. And let's say that the result is let me use this. We'll say that the results in the first roll is you get a 6. And even if you get a 1 and a 1, the 6 is the one that counts. Zoom a little. Okay. So you use that 6 and you're like, great. That is enough to succeed here. I got a perfect outcome. So I tried to hold up that door. I held up the door. Easy peasy. But now, actually, this is quite a difficult thing here. And so you rolled, if this had 1 difficulty, you would still roll those 3 dice, but you would add 1 thorn. And if that thorn right here, 5 would be the result. It's the highest one. If that thorn is a 7 or 8, normally the 5 here is a messy outcome, which is like you succeed, but maybe it wasn't as pretty, right? You by the skin of your teeth. Maybe maybe even you jumped across the chasm and you made it, but as you're jumping across, your helmet falls off or something like that. I mean, it depends on the situation. Um, I think in other games this might be called like yes with stipulations or yes with consequences. But if you rolled a 5 and you roll a thorn, you get dropped to the next category down. So you get cut from messy to grim. If you already roll a grim, you roll all 1s, 2s, or 3s, and you roll a thorn, my friends, not every rose does have a thorn. But you have a disaster, right? And so you're going to have an extreme bad outcome. It's beyond grim. All right. A critical happens if you roll 2 6s, and you can get a crit bonus, greater effect, secondary effect, set up a follow up, which are all things that you do in the scene to enhance the over of your action. Okay. So yeah, time sensitive challenges, tracking resources, fatigue, injury mechanics. I'm not going to do healing and recovery. So you want to start a campaign? Good for you. I do too. You should go on the Discord for Grimwild because they actually, I had to mute for a day. No offense. It's just I was at work and I've never seen a Discord so active in terms of like setting up playthroughs. Now it's early in the process here, but that always tells me something, like the enthusiasm for these kind of things, and people are pumped about this. Okay, and so could be wrong, but all right. So Vantage is your character's frame of reference, their backstory, everything. And sometimes you'll check against your vantage in terms of this is verisimilitude, it is fidelity to character, and it's basically saying using your characters the entirety of their life to render a score, and basically saying given everything this person has been through, given their education, given their early childhood, they were abandoned by their parents, whatever it is, given the situation, we look at this person and we enter and we look through them and we say, how likely is it that this person's going to succeed on this? Sometimes it's going to be absolutely no chance, right? Like say that you are, your task is that you need to do a kidney transplant, and your vantage is that you work at Menards and you work in the outdoor garden section. It's like, well, you have that's more than a reach. I might not even like attempt that, because what are you going to do? Like put vermiculite into the person's loop of Henley? You can't do that. Okay. And then tools. It can be augmented by gear and skills as well. Background right here. If you want to pause and take a look, you should get the free guide though. It's great. I mean, it's a nice big free guide. But the only one here that I would say is unexpected or doesn't normally fit with things is I think that okay, brawn is going to include menace, and sometimes that would be presence, because it'd be more like intimidate. And so you're going to have to suss out the difference between influence and intimidate. But they're divided by physical and mental. And then you also have these bonds, and you can, having those bonds, changing those bonds, is a dynamic thing that happens throughout play. And just like where was this here? Well, I don't know why I have to. I'll just say it. This is just another example of a way that this game incentivizes role play and narrative play, but not in a way that feels contrived, right? So It's not like, oh, that was a pretty good dungeon delve, and now you guys are back in the Sky Kingdom to rest between. I'm just making something up. If you are able to write 2 sentences about what you say to your comrades, then you get plus 1 gold. Well, I don't. How about we don't and say we did? You know what I mean? But here, there's so much reactivity between these things that all of these different things can be rolled against. It's going to affect your vantage. It's going to affect your bonds. It's going to affect your backstory and your capabilities, because this game sublimates narrative through quantitative checks. I've been wanting to say it. I don't even, now that I'm saying it, I thought it would sound awesome. It sounds kind of confusing, but it's true. This game does an incredible job at making the qualitative quantitative. All right. Sessions are about 3 hours. Assemble a group, 3 to 4 players and a GM. You have to decide on the party's theme and shared history. You create characters with backgrounds, paths, and stats, and you choose. I love this. Story arcs. Now, right here is a group arc that you are going to choose as a group, and you also have a character arc. And sometimes those are at odds, and sometimes people don't even know that they're at odds. But they give the player authorial power. Okay. So now, I don't want to overstate here. Like, I don't want to be a homer, right? Is that what they call it? Like somebody who just, no matter what the home team does. But here's, I think that, and I've talked to some of you about this, about the reason that my videos are so long, the reason that I waffle and ramble and stuff like that, is because I want to do the best job I can at conveying the meaning in my mind and installing it in your mind. I know it's not possible through words, but I want to give it my best shot. And one of the things that this game does really well is it ooh, sorry, had a tooth whistle there. It is very the genus species definitions that it creates are very exacting. I know what they're talking about. And when it's saying it gives your characters authorial power, that's significant, because what's the usual relationship for time immemorial between players and GMs? The GM spends 12 hours. They get written up at work because they stayed up too late one night and trying to plan out the campaign. They send out a bunch of resources to everybody. And then on the first day, it's like, okay, Tom, where do you want to go? It's like, well, where are we? And it's like, I sent you the map. Did you read that? No, I must have missed that. It's like, okay, well, you read the thing about the castle we're at, the Sky Castle. No, I didn't have time. And then go around. Nobody had time. Well, the reaction to that is one that will rely upon, was it Dietrich Bonhoeffer, like post conventional morality, where it's like primitive morality is doing something to avoid consequence. Conventional morality is doing something to get a reward. Post conventional is like doing something out of duty. And the duty bound one is a higher form of moral choice, but it is the strongest one because you've decided on your own. If you want to have a pre-conventional relationship about this, and this is 99% of what happens, is GMs, guys, you gotta read this stuff. Like, it's gonna, your campaign's gonna be better if you're on top of it. And also, it'll be hard for me to do this all on my own. Fast forward 49 weeks later, still doing it all on their own. And at a certain point, we have to question here, what in the hell is going on that these these players cannot, for love or money, cannot be convinced to read up on this. Well, I think sometimes as as a forever GM, I think because sometimes it's because they're a-holes or they're lazy. I mean, that is possible. Or at least partly, but also we have to ask a question of like, are we properly motivating the players to do this? Because what right now, what is the effect of in a lot of groups? Unless you're a part of a group that's been playing together a long time, you're on the ball, you know what's up, and those groups are incredible to play with, right? Like I am so jealous of seeing GMs like that sometimes where they'll like forget a rule and another player will know it better than them and they'll say it with just like, yeah, you're the GM right now, that's just your role, I'm going to help you out. Whereas like so many times I'll be looking for something and people will be like, I kind of want to like play, and it's like, well, if you would have known that rule, we could have moved along, right? So it's just not a very motivating thing. However, if the idea here is, look, you get to decide things about your character. You get to write part of this story. And you get to decide what's your backstory, what's your tangles, what's the details. And then you can present that story arc and you are going to give not necessarily a script, but a roadmap for your character's development. I want drama. I want dilemma. I want opportunities. And these arcs, they resolve in 3 to 5 sessions. 3 to 5 sessions. Beautiful. Okay, and then I think the other ones, we use marks for damage, and that will actually add thorns to action rolls. Okay, so it's kind of like an inverse of a year zero system, like the ones that I like, where you have say your character's strength is 4, right? Oh, sorry, wait, let me do it like this. So your character's strength is, sorry, I shouldn't have slammed that down there like that. That was probably loud. Your character's strength is 4, and whenever they're rolling strength, they roll 4 plus their skill. And then if they get hit in combat, they lose a strength. So not only do they have less like HP, but until they are healed, they are rolling 3 plus skill. It's kind of an inverse of that, where it's like rather than demoting the skill, you are adding an additional threat of the thorn. Ooh, that's a very good what is it called? Like a romance horror. The Threat of the Thorn. Written by Gigi Provolone. Any of you could take that pen name. That one's for free. Bloodied, rattled, right? You have the conditions resolve, and then these conditions: urgent, short-term, long-term, permanent. Okay. And long-term, permanent conditions, you're going to have to figure that out. Vex. You can spend Spark to take Vex in place of Rattled. It is an intense emotion. It's inflicted as a consequence, and it's in addition to a marker harm. So this is basically a short-circuiting of your reaction system. You're basically like knocked on your ass for it's one of those things where you get your clock cleaned, as they would say. Okay. Any odds and ends? Yeah, potency. When you have the potency on a task, you ignore thorns from difficulty and can attempt normally impossible tasks. A potent feat can do things like group action, stretching limits, mystical. You can also do teamwork. You could have everybody contribute to a pool if that makes sense. However, doubles do not count across different dice. So like if I roll 2d6, someone else rolls 2d6, and each of us get 1/6, that's not a crit. Okay, fasting forward. Key takeaways. That's right. I wrote down key takeaways. And don't expect this normally from me. Key takeaways. Character driven. Dice based resolution with D6s and D8s as thorns. Dynamic teamwork and narrative control, fast-paced combat without strict turns. We'll talk more about combat. And then diminishing pool for tracking long-term risk, and experience points are story-driven, which could include combat. So this is not about crunching numbers, it's about telling stories. And you do see the option to just dispense with some of this stuff if it's leading to a traffic jam. All right, I need to meditate for 5 minutes off camera so that I can teach combat without getting bogged down for 4 hours. Okay, really quick, I came out of my meditation to show you this creative freedom thing. Look at everything here that the players can do, right? As long as it does not override or contradict the established story, the characters get to story. So you could spend it to add story details that go beyond set dressing. Set dressing is like embellishment of the environment, right? Adding details. And then tangles. And all of these things not only let your players participate in the myth-making process that's happening, they also have mechanical influence. Genius, Bob. Genius. A mí me gusta esta página mucho. Estas páginas, porque eso aquí, y aquí, y también aquí, y eso aquí también. 4 páginas. Todo contienen ejemplos de jugar. Look at all of these examples, and on the right, you have commentary from the designer of the game. Will this show up in the final version? I hope so, because it works on both levels. This is really what I want when I'm learning stuff in the examples. So many times, even in very good games, when they're giving examples of play, they leave you out to dry, man. They put in this confusing stuff, and then they just leave you there. And they'll say, like, and of course, in this situation, you would do this totally different thing. What? I mean, it happened with One Ring, where they like gave me a sample character and then had me run through an example of a scenario with those characters, but the stats in the book did not match the stats on the sample sheets. Like, why would you make that choice? Okay. I've decided I'm not going to talk about combat. Just quickly, treasure, arcana, rituals, spellcasting rulings. We should talk about spell casting, I suppose, but just like high level here. I'm not talking about the mechanics much. Okay. All right, my meditation, I'm vetoing. I got to veto it because I need to get to the end of this video, not because I'm trying to like get it done with, but because we'll keep talking about this game. I mean, I'm going to get like the whole loadout here in physical form when it comes, and so I'm in. So don't worry about that, and we can talk about some of this mechanic stuff. And as usual, there's other people who are probably way better at this. In terms of magic, this is an area that I'm curious to see how this plays out because it's very, very ad hoc, improvised, and the resolution system, I would say, is one place where I get a little bit nervous about the looseness of it. In the fact that like not only are you determining like what your magic looks like, you're also determining what it does, how well it does that, the situations, and I think this is good right here. It's guided by like don't be a weasel, but I think that some people right here, you know, this system can be exploited in unfun ways. So that's an interesting thing. That kind of sentence shows up a lot in games that are more collaborative, more emergent. And I think the problem with these kind of statements is the people who need to hear it don't listen, and the people that don't need to hear it don't need to hear it, right? Because it's like they're already on board. And so what happens is I think one of the things that is most important, and having played Coriolis taught me this, is in almost every situation, it is best to avoid a power struggle between the GM and the player. So either the ruling has to be definitive or the ruling has to be democratic. And if it's democratic, then you have to value the input of the player. And if you value the input of the player and they take advantage of that, you have invited that in and you have to deal with the consequence of that. And so just saying like, yeah, you know what, this system can be totally exploited. For some people, that's it. They're like, if there's too many things like this in a game, then they're going to say, well, this isn't a game. This is like an improvisational practice. It's a theater exercise, right? Which is what I don't want to happen with this game. That said, I haven't looked too far into it. It definitely is part of the flavor. You know, like I said, there's no like lore here. It's a tone. It's a setting in as far as a tone with a little bit of like there's a world, there's rules to the world, and magic in Grimwild is what do they say? Wild, unpredictable, dangerous, not a tool to be taken lightly. Look at this loser. It's like 2 a.m. It's good. You hear that? Ugliest Mustang ever seen. What a disgrace. Okay. It is very, very volatile. Okay. And you're always going to do risk and reward for it. The magic in this is neither ally nor enemy. All right. You don't, it is amoral. And it also has a quality to it such that the more magical power that you attract to yourself, it's going to have an effect on your fate. Again, whether that's good or bad, it's not the concern. Additionally, there is, I would say, the other thing that is maybe the most concrete thing here about this world, besides like how the magic works, is the different worlds. I'm going to check really quick to see if this is in the quick start. I don't know why I just didn't use the quick start from the start. All right, so 3 realities. These are the 3 different like sort of planes of Grimwild. You don't even have to use these in the game. As they say, you can hang your own fiction off of them, topple them over, create something different. I want them to lean into this. I want them to build this out a little bit because this is one piece that could really elevate this game. Is if it starts to build a mythos around it, a history, a piece, and I think the way that can happen here, because I'm not suggesting that these just finish a nearly 200-page book. Now it's like get to work, start telling me all about the different deities and stuff. Which I actually think they do list something like that. But I think it'll be like a really good supplement that comes out, or a really good campaign or adventure that it will seem to like calcify around and then build out from there. But for now, this is good. I mean, it's almost like you almost want this at the beginning of a game's existence to allow people to infuse their stuff in there and kind of see where it goes, because the mechanics and the theme and the tone are seedlings, and from that, certain things will grow. Like, and there'll be a synchronicity to it. Like different people, different groups playing don't even know each other. I bet are going to come to like some of the same conclusions. There's seasons here that can have different narrative effects, which then can affect the players in different ways. Expanding the map, this is very interesting. I forget which game it was. I didn't love the game for when I played it, but it's maybe is it Wildermyth? I'm not sure, but it's one of those games where it's like a hex map and you almost like have to open a hex. And this is kind of cool. Like you get the GM uses the expand the map move. All the players get 3 exploration tokens, and then they can like spend those to expand the map. That could lead to Spark. We'll see. We'll see about that. I need to think about that one a little bit more. Okay. Um. So combat. Let me sum it up this way. It's cinematic. It's intended to be fluid. There's no strict turn order, which is in another game that I think there are different opinions about. Players always roll for their own attacks and defenses, so that's going to keep them plugged into things. Enemies follow simple rolls in terms of their mechanics, in terms of what they're doing, in terms of what they're saying. All of that is where you can, improvise on many different variants. But in terms of, what happens with them, they're not going to have a loadout of 66 different attacks. Uh, Environment plays a major role encouraging creativity and tactical play, and failure leads to conditions, not just lost hit points, conditions that lead to consequences. Combat, they want it to be fast, flexible, narrative first, and I really think I should play in a combat focused one shot. So if anyone from that Discord is watching this right now, please send me a like peer pressure me. I think my Discord name, which also, if you're a member of SEAL Team Waffle Alpha, you could send me a message. I believe it's Man Alone Waffle. There we go. Okay. We talked about the supernatural. There's a faction mechanic where factions evolve over time. There's these ways of creating maps, which I think is quite good from what I can tell. And then crucibles. Okay, so these are the generative oracles that make me and solo kind very happy because when you look at the solo section of this, and it's contained in a hidden chapter 7, which you get from buying it. So I'm not gonna show it on here. I could talk about it a little bit, but I do want to like respect their model that they've come up with here, which is honestly, it's extremely generous and it is extremely cool. Not only are they giving out um, 146 free pages and just holding off the 7th, which consequently for solo players is definitely the one we want. I believe they're also, I could check, I think they put this under Creative Commons 4.0, which is just like, let's see. Yeah, open licensed. All of it is under CC BY, free for personal or commercial use. That's awesome. That's awesome because you know what? We got well, I don't want to get on a copyright. We, Soon we're going to realize that this system it's not working anymore. And so the more that we just try to make it work, the more that we're just like pushing together Legos and Tychos. Ah. Okay. So just talking about story arcs and I'm sorry, story kits, I think is the last thing before solo. The story kits are interesting to me in that they are like, how do I describe? Guys, I yield. I'm when every time I scroll through to tell you about something, I just catch something that gets me so jazzed and I can't do it. I have to suggest that you read this if you're interested in it, but I hope I've done enough to establish um my final thoughts on this for this video. But right here I was just stopped again by like looking at this system of combat and everything is that looking through the frame of this as a scene, as a an arc, you you say, oh, well, how do these how do all the monsters like look at these Look at the bestiary. So these are basically the four enemies right here. These are the tiers, and these are the roles. Okay. Um, and more examples. Campaigns. I want to say a little. Oh, this is all character creation here. Um, I love at character creation is very active, very interactive, a lot of talking, bard, talents, berserker. Okay. Um, we talked about the three realities. All right, look at these. These are entries. It lists things it does. It lists types of attacks it has. And on top, it lists the description. Also, every single one of these has something it wants and that it doesn't want. And so, depending on whether you can or are willing to give it what it wants, you maybe are not going to have to fight it. And each of them are a certain category. Okay. And so notice like here's a brute, here's a marauder, here's a predator, a swarmer, etc. These ones are like arch fiends, right? They have like a little bit more. And the only really stat thing here, and you say, well, how could this work? How could this work? Well, it works because it's what happens in Ironsworn and Starforge, which with like milestones, but it just makes more sense because of the frame of how we're looking at it. And the frame of how we're looking at it is as creating a film, okay? And so everything varies in its challenges by how many. It's basically another resource pool, right? And so that the larger the number of dice, the more of a challenge they are going to provide. And the trick is not to learn how to, I have to learn how to, I have to learn how to implement this monster. I have to learn how to deal with this combat scenario. You don't, because here's what is so nice about being a GM here is that in truth, once you learn how to create challenges, and it has these instructions on creating these challenges, once you know how to do that, which is essentially just like talking about right up here. Okay, so however hard the challenge is, that's how many dice. And then you talk about like things that have to be accomplished or in order to succeed. You use the crucibles to feed in some narrative quality to it. And then you see the X, that's the fail state, right? And so if you don't get it, the fail state happens. And so this is the same. This is what it takes a little bit of like leap here. This is the same as having a character with like a big particular stat block in terms of how it plays out and ends. The ingredients are different, or maybe the recipe is different, but the outcome is the same. It might just have different like ways of zooming in and out in terms of like how specific you can get. But even if you have a more complex challenge, you can link together challenges. Look at this one, negotiating peace in a civil war. You think that's going to be like one challenge? No. And so once you know how to do that, you apply that paradigm to everything. You apply it to environmental, monsters, whatever you want, because it's all about challenges. And it's that because it's named challenges. And then even for the GM rules, look at how they describe it. A GM as the GM, you play the game by a different set of rules. Not you run the game, not you facilitate the player. You're playing, you just have different rules. You have different moves. You have different benefits. And in fact, it talks about things um, as like things that you earn, right? You are able to get, I think, suspense points, if I'm remembering correctly. You have certain story moves. Yeah, you have suspense moves. Use these moves with cinematic timing. So the GM is also playing, they're just playing with different rules. That feels so good to hear if you're a GM. Um, okay. So, yeah, combat is theater of the mind, and there is no initiative. That's another thing I'd say along with magic that I'm a little bit we'll see. We'll see how that plays out, but especially in solo, I'm just thinking maybe I would just figure out some sort of initiative system. But in group play, you're going to be looking at in the theater of the mind and like what is everyone's situation here? Who would uh, strike first? Who would it make the most sense for? That's really the question, and it relies on a sensible exchange about that. Okay, story kits. These include components that are not new: hooks, intro text. Um, they're basically one page, uh, your grandma's bread recipe. They include everything you need for a delicious loaf of a scene, a story scene, or a series of scenes. You have ways to set it up. You have things that are useful. You have on the bottom these potentially these potential challenges, example challenges, right? Pressure pools. Pressure pools keep the events unfolding in dramatic fashion, rolled to build tension. So as you're going through this, you have these pressure pools that are counting down. They're getting closer. Um, night's gonna fall in 4 dice. Then dawn's gonna break. Then the townsfolk are going to snap, right? And so these things are. Uh, there's no mystification about this. You are creating an awesome movie, and there's tons of these story kits, and they're going to keep coming because they're so easy to make, because the architecture of what is built up before then is makes it so that each step builds on itself. Okay. All right. So I think I've accomplished 1/18th of what I set out to do in total, but I now want to talk about what I introduced at the beginning of the video, which is like, what is going on here that I did not that I felt, and this is truly how I felt about Fate. I was ambivalent. I just was like, I'm not interested. This seems like something that I don't want to do. And then you have this game that is directly influenced by Fate. I mean, it lists it as an influence. So, like, what is going on that would change this for me? And I am completely open to the possibility that I don't that I'm like a that I'm a little weasel, right? I just, whatever I like, and whatever I don't like. Um, and maybe if Fate, maybe they should send me a free book, and then I'll give them the right review. I was open to that possibility because in my weird my brain is actually upside down. They found out it's got to be on its side or something, because somehow admitting to you that I am like a hypocrite feels more honest than like straightening out my beliefs about these things. I would rather tell you that, like, yeah, I have these different opinions about two things that are very similar and there's no reason for it. And so um that is not the case. And the what the case is, I think, illuminates a lot what is special about this game. Okay. All right. Just to button some things up. Number one, uh, as far as solo play, what you find is that the actual amount of space in the book that is dedicated to solo play is quite minimal. And it's really just like a section on adapting to solo play, and then another section on like solo playing with a party, right? Like multiple characters. And it works, I would say that works very similar to how we talked about in Moria, where you have like your main character and then you have these ancillary characters who are not NPCs, but they're not fully fledged characters that you have to manage. Okay. The reason it's limited is because by the time you hit the solo section, you realize that you already have everything you need. Like the book already has a solo system built into it. And so rather than providing you with lots of tables and different things like that, it is giving you a set of principles to how to implement it in a solo mode. That said, I'm the man alone. And so once things, once like things release a little bit more, maybe are, let me just show you. You know that I can't read through a whole core book without coming up with some solo things, right? So uh, I'm gonna, I'll try to get in touch with JD and see when a good time to put this out is, because again, I want to kind of like respect the model that they're going with here. It's an independent company, so I want to make sure that I'm not giving information away that's part of like the special things that will be sold as part of that. But as I made two appendices, the first, I merely collected all of the things from the book that are likely to be used in solo play. So like I just kind of summed up the things that would be frequent references. All right. And then so that's appendix 1. And then open generative. I started using Adobe, which like I'm on a Mac and I use Preview for like my whole life, and now I'm like learning. Oh, do I have to pay for it? Now I'm learning that Adobe has like way more features, and I forgot because like for most of my life I used Acrobat Reader. Why am I talking about this? Okay, so yeah, so and then I came up with some just like generators in terms of just randomizing next step and stuff like that. Okay. So for number yeah, so I just a lot of this is just like shells of it because I'm going to fill it in more. My process is I speed write stuff so that I have the headings and everything like that. But appendix 2, I'm only going to show you this. So this one is this is mechanics that are created by me to assist with solo play with this, and I set up a system called the writer's room. So it's basically a solo, not oracle, but it's a solo plot generator that uses, rather than like tables and stuff, it uses the frame of a TV show writer's room to develop ideas. So again, I'm gonna wait till things come out more, but yeah, I'll put this out for I'll put this on drive through when I finish it. Depending on how big it is, I'm thinking it might $2 or something like that. You know what? For SEAL Team Waffle Alpha members, this one's a freebie DB. Okay. All right. I'm going to put out my advanced clock now so that I can identify when I am putting the timestamps in the video. I'll try to put a timestamp here. This is the part of the video that, it's like that part in class where they say, or at a work meeting, they're like, technically this meeting was only scheduled till 1 p.m. So if you have somewhere to go, you can leave. Otherwise, if you want to stick around and just like finish the discussion, and all the cool people just like get up and leave. So this is at 1:39. So I'm just putting my clock here. We'll say 1:39. And that way, when I see it in the video, I know that that's where the timestamp comes in. Okay. Let's talk really quick about Grimwild, Grimwild, and Fate. How are they similar? Let's start there. All right. They're both narrative-driven RPGs. They both are prioritizing storytelling, character, having characters drive the story, player agency, not just GM edicts. They prioritize the storytelling over more rigid mechanics and actually defer to the storytelling anytime there's a conflict between story and mechanics. In most cases I can think of, both of them would defer to not only rule of cool, but like rule of ease, rule of speed, because the mechanics are only there in both of these systems to support drama and tension. Failure is narrative whenever it can be. And in fact, failure is, in most cases in these, it's not usually in it. Both of these books sort of train you or hope to train you that when things don't go your player character's way, that doesn't mean they're not going your way, because they're revealing something new. They're revealing something more about the character, about the story, etc. And so that's good. Something is happening. It happens in both directions. We need those things, tension and release, to create a compelling story. But also, when you roll poorly, rarely in both these games do they let you just say like nothing happened, right? Everything should propel. Everything should propel. As far as players, we're part of this. We got to collaborate. And I think Fate really has good ways of bringing players in for the fullness of that like world creation. And I think that Grimwild is more generative as you encounter new things. And if you when you pick this up, and I encourage you to get the PDF, because I must say Chapter 7 has some real goodies in it. I think it's $20 right now on drive-through. Yeah, so like in Grimwild, that you could do, the players can participate in generating locations, factions, all kinds of details. And the players' choices are not lip service. Like, that is important in both games, is that the players are not only, like in some other more classic mechanical tabletop 5ES games, player choice can be is often group choice, first of all, and then also it's like customizations, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons I just can never play through Baldur's Gate, because and like no judges here, because I understand that this is just something about me that is different than some people. I don't care about like changing people's clothes and haircuts and stuff like that. That doesn't mean anything to me. And I don't say that to say that people who do care about that is stupid or something. Like, it is it's just not something I'm interested in. And so when somebody says, "Oh, this game, you could really customize your experience," I say, "Well, what does that mean to you?" Because to me, customization means that like I get to to bend like a Uri Geller spoon. I get to bend the character arc of my character in a way, right? Like, yes, I understand the GM is going to be able to ultimately like connect my rainbow roads of fate, but I want to be able to bend it. I want to be able to weigh it down. I want to be able to twist it a little bit. And both Fate and Grimwild want players to shape themselves, to shape the world, and to introduce story elements, be proactive, be part of it. Um, and I have to say that I am glad that games like this exist, whether I prefer to play them or not, because we need to start moving. Here's kind of a bold prediction I have, actually. We need to start moving away from the classical paradigm of like some people are GMs and some people are players. I just don't think it works anymore, and it's not fair. Um, the reason why I am a forever GM is because I've been habituated to that. Because nobody else wants to do it, whether they're not confident enough, whether it's not fun. And because of that, for the last 3 years, I am just default GM. And I like it and I'm good at it. But also, I would love to play in a group where, we can change every season of gameplay or something like that. And I think that the more games that invite co ownership of the story, it is not only going to lessen the load on GMs, it's also going to provide opportunities for players to see that they would be good GMs. Because the one thing I didn't say that I think gets in the way a lot more than it should is confidence. There are players who are amazing players, and I know they would be good GMs, but they're like, no, 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 I can't do it. I would get too stressed out. Yeah, maybe you would, but I would be there and I would be a player and I'd be helping you. Well, then you should just be GM. But it's like, no, but what if we were in a group where everyone was helping you and everyone was helping each other? Uh, I just don't think, because it's starting to be less and less worth it as a GM. There's so many things, especially in groups of strangers, that like I could be a GM for a group of 4 people, and I can pour in hundreds of hours into it, and then suddenly in month 6, somebody has like a grievance around I'm giving preferential treatment to somebody else. I'm not allowing them to be their own character, et cetera, et cetera. And I can tell you that there is just like no. It can be quite devastating. Like, it is one thing to not have people demonstrate full gratitude for something that you're doing for them. Like, it's that's part of the GM thing, is like, if you're doing it well, it looks easy. And I fully understand that some people like um are not able to fully get like everything that I'm doing. It's another thing to like have that thrown in your face as like you're actually trying to sabotage us. And that happened on a recent campaign of mine, and I was like shocked. It like really, really hurt. Um, because not only was it insinuating that that I was like getting jollies off of making things difficult for them, when in truth, like, I was way doing the opposite. Like, they would have been long dead. But I couldn't tell them that because it also would have revealed some of the story. Ooh, sorry, I hit the mic. But also, I that just wasn't the case at all. It just wasn't the case at all. And there was something in the conversation that indicated that, like, well, like, anybody can do it. Like, they didn't believe that. They thought I was improvising the whole time. And I was like, no. And so it was one of those weird lessons in life, like, if you know somebody who like complains a lot and gets a lot of stuff for it, and you're often like, well, I guess I should start complaining all the time, right? But if, it's not good. Anyways, thematic character progression is going to take precedence over traditional leveling in both of these. Okay, so it's about narrative. It's less about mechanical precision, more about emergent narrative and about co-creation of that world. Perfect. All of those things I like about Fate. Maybe not how they're explained. In fact, particularly not how they're explained or how they're presented or how they are accessed by the players. And in fact, uh, in what I just said, as trivial or as sort of a tertiary order opinion that I just gave, that is a core reason that Grimwild succeeds where Fate does not. For me, okay? Let's just really quick differences. Obviously, Fate dice and Moxie system, they're different, right? We're using D6s, we're using dice pools. Fudge dice go like -4 to +4. I would love to talk to a grognard about like, because some people love these. And of course, I'd have to play with them, and all dice rolling is fun. But they do feel quite bland to me. I don't know if I'm being like a little baby, but I'm not as excited about seeing a plus and a blank dice than I am seeing like those beautiful rows of pips. It just doesn't feel as as fun. I don't know why all right, here we go. Padded dice tray here with my soundproofing. So okay. I'm like measuring this here, how I feel. So that's that. And now let's try. Wee! Yeah, no, it is. I kind of feel like 27. Rolling like a 27 is more exciting than rolling a +2 or a 0. Uh, that's a small thing, but I think it does fit into the wider picture here that I'm going to attempt to establish. And some of you are going to go, huh, good point. And some of you are going to say, interesting, probably not. And some of you are going to go berserk. Okay, so I would say that Grimwild has more chaos. Um, Dice pools are going to be swingier, right? I mean, that's obvious here. There is lots of options per dice, and Fate or Fudge dice have at best they represent a single battery. Fate is both of them are open systems, although Fate is generic and setting agnostic. It can handle any kind of story. Grimwild is and I'm very glad of this. It has situated itself in a genre, at least right now. And there is a like a adventure or setting that's coming with it that's a bit more of like horror, but it's dark fantasy. So those, if you ever like Pilgrim, those can be pretty close on the genre clock. And so Fate wide open, Grimwild is going to have this cinematic dark fantasy. It's going to have mystery, the supernatural, the occult, maybe a decaying world. And Fate has more open-ended, right? So like Fate is, in terms of world creation, you create whatever world you want. And that's why the core book has and I understand that there are some people in the comments that did not agree with me, but I stand by it. I think Fate's illustrations are uncanny valley. I don't like them at all. Although some people said it is the reason they like it the most. And see, everyone's different. I got glasses and other. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, so yeah, I think quibbling here, but Fate has them like terraform the whole world, or beyond that if it's different planets. Where Grimwild has its 3 planes or worlds: the remnants, the wilds, and the third one, ruins. The ruins. Okay. Now we have the Fate system versus this Moxie system, and I can't say that I have a great handle on either. but the Moxie system feels like a little bit less to swallow and digest. In Fate, if you fail, it's mitigated, right? You have those aspects. You could spend Fate points, and this allows players to exert control and pull back on bad rolls. Grimwild is that failure is more common, it's more immediate, and it results in complications, tangles, dangerous consequences. The environment shifts, and the thorns are added in to escalate difficulties. So sometimes, um, rather than mitigating that failure, it throws the player deeper into that failure, into a place of like horror and despair. Uh, Fate combat is more structured, and it has. Um, Correct me if I'm misspeaking here. Aspects and zones, and there's turns, right? Whereas Grimwild is going to have a more dynamic flow, and it's going to use agreements and collaborative narration. Not sure how that's going to work out. Fate is both of them have like progressive relationships between GM and player, and in Fate the GM is rolling dice. In Grimwild, the GM never rolls dice, and the player, it's always going to be player facing to determine actions and outcomes, and so only the players are going to be the arbiters of that. And then the magic system is different. I don't have to get into that too much, but suffice to say, here's what I wrote down. I would use Grimwild if I wanted a darker, grimdark cinematic fantasy that has some built-in tones that are reliable, that I can depend on for being able to invoke, and that are supported by the bestiary, by locations they make, etc. It's a little bit more chaotic of a dice system, which I happen to like. Some people do not like that, and I think people who don't like that, there's a lot of reasons for that. Some people just generally do not like things that feel capricious, and that especially holds true if something happens that is absurd, like mathematically absurd. That the mathematically absurd does tend to happen, and stuff like like Mort Borg, I think, would drive some people crazy. And I can't tell you how many times I've like walked onto the road, rolled one encounter dice, had a combat, and died. After setting my character up and printing out sheets and everything. Some people really get annoyed by that, especially if they're in group play and they might have to like sit out or become somebody else. It could be quite annoying to some people. Um, if you want a system that's player driven, if you want consequence, risk reward type magic, and you want this like fast, dangerous, loose combat, Grimwild. Whereas Fate, flexible, any setting, more predictable dice system, 4DF, I guess you call it, that has more balanced probability, structure, point-based narrative system that uses these fate points aspects, and turn-based combat, etc. Okay. So here is where we now have the part that you need to stop and watch the entire movie of Synecdoche, New York. You don't have time. Okay. Well, I guess I'll do my best here. So, Synecdoche, New York, not Schenectady, whatever, is one of my favorite movies. And I know that for those of you that know this movie, you have an immediate reaction to that. Either you think I'm pretentious or I don't know what good movies are. But a couple of things. Number one, Philip Seymour Hoffman, we look alike. And there is a huge level, if anyone is familiar with the psychological term of like countertransference, where someone looks like somebody familiar and you sort of sometimes place feelings onto them that don't really make sense or aren't warranted. I very, very strongly had that. And I also had some of the same issues, uh, and he died of a drug overdose. And when that happened, this only happened to me twice, where somebody who I never knew, but they existed to me in a parasocial form. They died, and I felt grief, like I felt an actual grief reaction. And the first was um, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and the other was a man named Mark Linkous, who was the one of the most gifted guitarists, songwriters. Oh man, I actually feel bad thinking about it right now, but I identified with both of these people a lot, and then they died. And one of them, Mark, what do you say on YouTube? He exited stage right early, and then PSH had I think it was heroin overdose. And I mean, look, you don't have to attend psychoanalysis to know, if you identify with somebody and you struggle like somebody, and then that person meets a tragic end, that has a potential to shake you to your core. Um, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Oh, it's that weird thing where I started having an emotional reaction, and then I was like, I can't possibly be having that. That's so ridiculous, because like, it's not like the first time I've thought of this. Anyways, it's probably because I know that this is going to be like seed in front of a lot of people that I don't know. But anyways, um, Synecdoche, New York is a 2008 movie. It's by Charlie Kaufman. It was after another one of his amazing movies that I know that not everybody likes. Adaptation with Nicolas Cage, which I would say that out of any movie in the world, I've seen that movie the most times. But when I watched Synecdoche, New York, it is a hilarious, bizarre, surreal, definitely postmodern movie about a man named Caden Cotard, who is a celebrated playwright. Like, he has a MacArthur Genius Grant or whatever. He lives in New York City, and he's having some trouble, like, with his second act of like, what, one of these stories is somebody who has like an amazing first play, and then the second time around he can't like put it together, right? And he's also getting himself into some trouble in terms of taking care of himself, maybe enjoying other benefits of his fame, and being neglectful at home. He gets this grant, and he decides that he wants to create a studio in which he recreates his life in the studio. And the studio is quite big, okay? It's like a big warehouse. And he has like a house, his house or his apartment built there, and then he'll cast people to be him, and then those people will play him, and he will sit there with them and tell them their lines and say, no, that's not how I'd say this, right? And it begins to be more and more and more immersive, to the point that the people he hires to be actors, they eventually like also hire actors, because that's what he does, and they're trying to act like him, and so they also hire actors. And this warehouse that they're filming this in, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and then it's like a as big as the New York Giants football stadium. And then towards the end of the movie, it is like as big as Rhode Island. There's like no limit. It even has like its own sky and stuff, but it's all this like facsimile. Okay. So, um, when we talk about fate points, for example, aspects, we're talking about these tools that are used to shape the world. Keep that in mind. This framing that certainly Charlie Kaufman has some misses with this, but this shows up a lot. And if you've ever read his book Ant Kind, it's about this play with hundreds and hundreds of like little ventriloquist dummies that is performed and nobody sees it, and it's too long. It's like 26 hours long or something, or the play would last more time than your lifetime to see it, or something like that. So he writes a lot of recursive narratives, where you have layered realities and where fiction and reality fold into each other. And it's for this reason that he is often labeled as indulgent, pretentious, right? Um, but this very weird thing happens, and some people actually call it a Kaufman effect, which is uh, that somehow knowing that you are not fully immersed in the story, that it is like a story about a story, some weird emotional interchange happens inside you where it somehow feels more meaningful for some people. For some people, they're like, get me the hell out of here. And I also want to say, interestingly, that Caden Cotard, the last name Cotard, is the name of a neuropsychiatric disorder called Cotard syndrome or Cotard's illness, in which a person, it's rare, but a person will believe that they are dead. It is a fixed, unmovable delusion that if you argue with it, it actually reinforces. So the person will dig their heels in and they will become more convinced that they are dead. You know, you could say, hey, no, I'm alive. How can I be alive? I know I'm alive. And they're like, well, no, you're a shade. Like, you're here to torture me by trying to confuse me or whatever. And I think that is a bit of a key there, right? Like, when one is not able to tell the difference between when they are in the story, out of it, or the subject of it. Okay. The set keeps expanding, and these actors are playing real people, and then they even start to look like each other. And then they start playing actors, and then they start playing actors playing real people who are actors. And so it's this like recursive, self-referential loop. And what we try to do as the viewers, because we're smart and we want to know this, is the same thing that happens in I want to say Insomnia, but Inception. Remember at the end, there's like the little spinning top, and you're like, wait, I need to know, are we in the dream or not? Humans, whenever confronted by this version of the abyss, the repeating mirror, we say, which is the prime? Where's the real mirror? And any sort of abstractions or sublimations that are like, no, they're all equally real. No. Where's reality prime? It's for this reason that I think that people who are flippant about the simulation theory don't realize that, like, some people, current speaker included, view that as like a cosmic horror. The idea that a society developed to the point that they could implement a simulation and it would have such high fidelity that you'd no longer know the difference, and it'd have so many options that it would all but conform perfectly to physical reality of whatever reality created it. And furthermore, that simulation could become so accurate that it itself spawns another simulation, and on it goes, a repeating reflection in a mirror. I have a point with this, I promise. So we want to locate the real world, and we want to differentiate it between the constructed world. We are very naturally, we want to know what's real. I mean, if you think about any problems of like a bad trip, if a person uses hallucinogenics, if a person's subject to a trauma, if a person has a sort of blunt force trauma to the head, they want to, they experience a panic about unreality, right? There's this thing we what is the real one? Where is the real? I don't want the artificial. Where is the real? Okay. The film, however, it never tries to play those little tricks on you that some people will try to play when they're very like, oh, I'm very, oh, what is real? What is real? "Oh, why do you want base reality? All realities are real." The film never does that. The film 100% is like, this is a movie, and you are watching an endless act of procreation and recreation, I guess. This is what Grimwild does compared to Fate Core. Fate Core asks you to pretend that your mechanical decisions are happening inside that world. This is a cognitive strain because now I'm both the player and the narrator, and I also, when I'm the player, have to forget that I'm the narrator. Okay? The game never acknowledges the existence of the narrator role. But Grimwild, like Synecdoche, New York, it removes that cognitive strain by acknowledging right up front, not only are you telling a story, you need to follow steps to tell a damn good story. You need to do these strategies so that the movie you make is good. It admits the presence of the storyteller. It removes then that friction that Fate Core has, right? And because it removes that friction, because we are able to glide into that, oh dear, my camera went off. My camera lens burned out. I don't care. We're just gonna scroll through the PDF here. I've been waiting my whole life to talk about this movie. Okay. Synecdoche, New York removes that cognitive strain because it acknowledges that a story is being told. That's the same thing. The moment that Grimwild admits the presence of a storyteller, which is almost right away, right? I think we could see it like right here. Grimwild is a game of cinematic fantasy adventure, and that in that setting that feels like a fun ensemble cast TV series, each session a new episode. Okay, it is a set in a world of your choosing or one you create together. It isn't a setting, and things get dramatic. Okay, there's no double speak here. It removes the friction of fate. And so, just as in Synecdoche, New York, it allows us to suspend our disbelief more easily because it fully embraces the recursive self aware structure. Okay. Grimwild, it allows us to engage in storytelling without having to pretend that we are inside the world we're building. I am not suggesting that this makes it objectively superior. I'm saying, given how I experience stories, how I experience movies, the requirement of fate to make me keep switching the code in my head so that I am narrator, participant, it is distracting to me. Okay, it feels like it feels like my camera going out, right? It's like you're at this big scene of a movie and all of a sudden you have to handle some sort of like mechanical issue. So the best way to maintain immersion in a regular environment is to hide the background. Okay, this is the normal correct thing to do in a normal story. Look, you ever been to Disney World? The reason why I haven't been there in years, but the reason why Disney World was better than other theme parks is because in other theme parks I would see the workers smoking, and in Disney World as a little kid, I truly thought that like Mickey and everyone was there because they only show you the narrative. However, that is a traditional form of narrative. And not only have narratives evolved, but the audiences have evolved, and they are too savvy now, right? It is no longer people going to the moving pictures show and being oohed and wowed by a bunch of stuff. We just don't buy it anymore, right? And so in traditional storytelling, you have this struggle between the author or director or GM or DM, the narrator, who's a storyteller, whether they are overt or implied, and the participant slash player slash viewer. But when a game or film or TV pretends there is no author, the audience has to do extra mental work to ignore the structure. They have to do it. I had to do it. And that can pull some people out of the experience. It just depends. I bet it depends a lot on generational things. I bet it depends a lot on narratives that you're used to and narratives that you prefer. Look, my favorite, I just said that Synecdoche, New York is one of my favorite movies. Some of you think that the way I describe that movie is it sounds like a pretentious piece of crap that is for people that love to like stick their heads up their keister and have a nice look around. Fine. It's what I like, though. I'm a millennial or whatever. And so I, lived in this irony poisoned emergence that was probably created by Seinfeld or something, right? This is self-referential, like no narrative exists outside of reality. It's in constant interplay with it. Okay. So in Synecdoche, New York, rather than pulling me out of that experience, that film, it embraces that meta awareness. It makes the recursive storytelling explicit, just like Grimwild does when it says, quote, you are the director of a film, you're shaping the narrative. I don't know if that's a direct quote. But like accept that role. Okay, it's not a big surprise. That's the plot. In contrast, fate tries to hide it. And paradoxically, I was about to say ironically, but I don't think it's ironic, or if it is, I cannot calculate the degrees of irony. It somehow makes the mechanics feel more intrusive because they're always working against the illusion, because I can hear them functioning on set. I can hear the little like conveyor belts and, little like pistons and everything working. And whereas in Grimwild, I'm able to fully buy into this idea because I'm in cahoots. I'm a co-conspirator in creating this. I'm not pretending that I'm not. And so I'm able to buy into that idea that reality and fiction are indistinguishable, in the same way that Grimwild, it lets me buy into the fact that the director and the storyteller, they both exist. The director and the storyteller both exist side by side, and I don't have to justify it. Okay. This is truly like, if you look at Charlie Kaufman's films, Adaptation, being John Malkovich, Anomalisa, which was okay. I'm not going to give a review for Anomalisa right now. It was fine. The act of storytelling itself becomes part of the story. Pretentious, self-absorbed, narcissistic, arrogant, yes. And if you want to see what Charlie Kaufman thinks about himself, watch Adaptation, because Nicolas Cage plays him. He plays him. Nicolas Cage plays Charlie Kaufman, who his main conflict in the movie is he has to write the movie Adaptation, which he is in. Okay. But that is what Grimwild is doing that Fate isn't. It's acknowledging the act of creation, and so it's more immersive. The audience, me, I feel more engaged because I'm able to acknowledge the artificiality and let it go. All right. I think that the pretending, the act of pretending is not a universal blanket thing. Like the pretending to be or do something has different qualities depending on what I'm asked to pretend to do. If I'm asked to pretend that if I'm asked to pretend to be someone I'm not, I can pretend that. But it's harder for me to both pretend that I am someone and also pretend that I'm not, and also have to referee between those. And the net effect for me is that Fate, even though it explicitly doesn't want to do this, the net effect is it feels more mechanical and less authentic. It's the difference between I'm just gonna I'll just use the words I want to say here. It's the paradox of diegetic mechanics versus explicit meta narrative, right? It is the difference between tacit world building authority and explicit meta narrative framing. Fate Core or Fate Condensed or whatever. Actually, I don't know. Maybe those other ones are different, but it tries to maintain the illusion that everything is happening inside the world. Don't talk about what's happening outside the world, except you have to occasionally sneak out there to toggle some things, to be Ed Harris in Truman Show. Uh, Grimwild embraces the fact that you're shaping a narrative as an outside observer. No problem. Fate points, aspects, these invocations, they straddle. They're both in world and out of world at the same time. They're both. I mean, it truly it does if you even look at Fate, the way that it's referred to, it has an inconsistent like tense or case or whatever. And so there's this unspoken layer of artificiality where I'm nudging the story, but the mechanics never acknowledge me. And I'm doing this as a player. I'm not doing it as a character. So I'm constantly aware of the game mechanics, and that's why they feel heavier to me. And so now Grimwild, hell yeah, I'm director, I'm editor, I'm cinematographer, and I'm making a movie. I'm making deliberate creative choices. And you want to talk Kaufman-esque, this is not only what I'm doing, but it's also what JD Maxwell is doing, making definitive creative choices about how players and GMs make definitive creative choices, and so on and so forth. And what does it all come down to? Say it with me. Suspension of disbelief. Do you know who came up with that, by the way? I found this out last year. Coleridge. Coleridge. I didn't know this, but Coleridge was, I guess, more than just like a poet. He was big into lit theory. And he basically was like, yeah, people will accept fiction as long as it's cogent, as long as it's consistent within the story, and it's emotionally compelling. That is the price for my acceptance. It's coherent internally, and it makes me feel. Uh, and there's tons of research on how the way that digital storytelling, interactive storytelling, is changing the way people experience things. So I wonder, if you can. I hope that like if you feel differently about this, your urge right now is to like explain your experience rather than to be like, no, I'm wrong, because nobody's wrong here. But what I'm interested in is I wonder if there is anything to it that like the people who really like Fate, is there something different about you? Um, I mean, of course there is, but like on the whole, people who grew up playing this game, or people who grew up playing BX and just got tired of that and now they want this, or people who grew up in this era, because if you are 65 right now, I'm when did you get your first computer if you're not in computers? Because I got mine pretty late comparatively to standards now. I didn't get a computer till I was in my house did not get a computer till I was in 8th grade, and I did not have my own computer till I was a sophomore in college. And even that was enough to reshape the level of interactivity I had. Video games, the mystifying to my parents, right? Um, so it really is immersion comes at this cost uh, of this consistency, but Coleridge, I agree, it's got to be emotionally compelling. And if I have to like go work overtime to make it make sense, or I have to work overtime to keep sort of like squaring circular pegs, I it starts to feel like a raw deal. Now, the last thing I'm going to say, which I've said 6 times, and we're almost at 2.5 hours. I need to have a drink of water because when my camera broke, I ate like 14 Ritz crackers. 1 second. Oh, one thing, JD, please forgive me for this. I just want to show one thing in the extras because this is actually, I forgot to mention this. This is actually art wise the thing that gave me the hots for the art in this book is that in this back section, and there's tons of this, there's these images of that look like this, and all of them. I'm only going to show two, but this is this also happened. This also happened. This kind of thing was also in what's the JTTRPG? Not Ryukama. Um, Fabula Ultima. I love when stuff in a tabletop RPG looks like an inventory menu screen on a SNES or PS1. I just love that somebody took all this time with these like special little objects here, and there's lots of them, and they're really cool looking. It almost looks like the inventory on like Legend of Zelda or something, but just sort of like maxed up and given higher resolution. Okay, uh, all right. So here's my big provocation. Okay, my big provocation to you is I started this talking about um, the that we need to stop comparing games to D&D. However, if we must compare a game, which I don't believe that we should, D&D I do not think is the correct comparison here because there is actually a game that is an upstart system, and it is, I won't say it actively markets itself, but it is undeniable that people see it as an alternative to 5e, and it emerged during a time when there was resistance to 5e. Um, it has a similar approach to initiative. It has some interesting mechanics in terms of dice resolution and outcome resolution. I think that we would find much better comparison between Grimwild and Daggerheart because this is actually, I would say, two systems that contend to offer the same things. I mean, just look at now. Look, this is the playtest manuscript. I didn't. I think the PDF is out now, but just look at the table of contents. Preparing for adventure, playing an adventure, running an adventure, adversaries and environments, creating your world, customizing your game, how to homebrew, different stories, different terms, same story. Game's not out yet, so I don't know. But all I can say is this playtest. Okay, so you look at the first announcement that Matt Mercer did for this. He says, "What was it? Fun, fresh, fast, right? Low barriers to entry, kinetic gameplay, fast acting, fun combat. 400 pages. Again, not out yet, so I don't know. 400 pages though, and Grimwild is 169. Hope and Fear dice. I mean, I think I would veer too much into opinion now, but I do think that that is a similarly interesting approach to dynamic oracular resolution that is contained within the roll, right? Not only did you roll for success or failure, but you have this hope dice, you have a fear dice, etc. And if both of these games are making a claim to have a certain type of experience, and they do have some similarities, Even I think in the art that I've seen, I think it's different. Definitely, I think obviously Darrington Press has way more resources. Um, this I think could be Grimwild could be a good litmus test to judge Daggerheart against, because I don't think it's going to be able to be judged well against D&D. It's my opinion is it has complexity, but I am thus far unconvinced that that complexity is meaningful, and I fear, without full knowledge, I don't actually fear, I don't care, but I think some of that complexity comes from differentiation, the need to differentiate. Um, but in terms of pure preference, um, the I don't know how it can get much slicker than the way that things are done here in Grimwild. Um, what we're looking for is that cinematic narrative roleplay collaboration without this arbitrary mechanical interface. But different strokes. Daggerheart's going to have tactical grid. Grimwild's freeform. Honestly, that's a big one. I gotta see what that's like, because combat by like UN committee is a little bit weird to me. But we'll have to see, like, what is which one has the most appropriate level of player freedom, which one has meaningful constraints. There's lore to Daggerheart, right? So there's lots of differences here. But it is interesting that, like, the second like sales point for Daggerheart is the inclusion of cards, which I've actually interestingly, of the reviews I've seen, that was like front and center as one of the things that people are like, yeah, this is the best part of it. But we'll see. I'm merely throwing that out there as a possibility, because I think that anything is a better comparison than just kind of going up against the brick wall of D&D. And honestly, it's getting tired. And honestly, in some cases, it's becoming like transparent and grotesque. Like, stop doing that, because it just makes people lose credibility in my eyes. It's like, that this is apples and oranges. It's a completely different budget. And also, it's just putting so much pressure on a game that is just totally unfair. Just let it exist. Let it exist on its own. That's what I say about Grimwild. And that is what I say about hamsters and parakeets everywhere. I need $700 for a new camera, so if anyone wants to sign up to be a member, I could really use it. I think the bulb blew out, but it started sizzling. Can you believe that? I almost died to make this unbelievably long. Oh, it's already over?